The first thing I learned about interspecies diplomacy was that no training simulation prepares you for standing 3 feet from a violet-skinned alien with eyes bright enough to power a small flashlight. She wasn't wearing the standard visitor jumpsuit either. Instead, she had shown up to the research deck in what looked suspiciously like a designer exosuit that could double as a fashion statement. When the lab lights hit it, the suit shimmered like liquid emerald circuitry. "You're Dr. Riven Hale," she said, voice even, every syllable wrapped in an accent that sounded halfway between music and sarcasm. "You are the one who will study me, correct?" "Yes, study. Professionally?" I said, wondering why my throat had suddenly gone desert dry. "Completely scientific. Charts, data, non-awkward observations." Her left brow arched. "Non-awkward." I coughed. "That was aspirational." The alien, Lieutenant Liara of the Vithari Concord, glanced around the sterile lab as if deciding which piece of equipment could double as an escape pod. "Your people keep everything so white. It's unsettling. Feels like being trapped inside a medical brochure." "That's how we know it's clean," I replied. "Clean is overrated," she murmured, studying me with those neon green eyes. "Chaos breeds evolution." That should have been my first warning. She enjoyed chaos the way a physicist enjoys paradoxes, purely, endlessly, and preferably at someone else's expense. Our mission was simple on paper: catalog physiological differences between humans and Vithari. But within 5 minutes, she had turned the sterile experiment into a comedy of errors. When I asked her to step onto the bioscanner, she examined it suspiciously. "Does this device disassemble my molecules?" "No. It just scans." She stepped on anyway, smirked, and said, "If I reassemble as a chair, make sure it's at least ergonomic." The scanner chirped an error. Of course it did. Liara hopped off, hair swaying in 2 immaculate braids. "Your machine appears shy." "No, it's just never scanned someone with bioluminescent dermal tissue." Her grin was pure mischief. "So I make your machines nervous too?" I nearly dropped my clipboard. Machines don't—" "Relax, Dr. Hale," she interrupted. "Your face turns red at the slightest provocation." "It's adorable." I scribbled random notes to avoid eye contact. "Subject exhibits advanced teasing instinct. Potential hazard to human dignity." While I recalibrated the scanner, she wandered the lab, poking buttons that shouldn't be poked. "What's this one do?" she asked. "Don't—" I started, too late. A mist of blue sterilizing spray enveloped her. She froze, then looked at me accusingly through the haze. "Congratulations," I said dryly. "You've just sanitized the entire East Wing," she blinked. "You're welcome." By the time the mist cleared, she was laughing, a musical, unguarded laugh that echoed off the lab walls and somehow made the sterile place feel almost alive. That laugh was dangerous, the kind that could convince you to throw safety protocols into the nearest black hole. She leaned on a counter, droplets still glittering on her violet skin. "So tell me, Dr. Hale, what exactly do humans find attractive?" I blinked. "I thought this was a physiological study, not sociology." "It's both," she said smoothly. "Besides, attraction affects physiology. Elevated pulse, dilation of pupils, inefficient multitasking." Her gaze flicked down to the trembling pen in my hand. "Evident already." I set the pen down very carefully. "You're running your own experiment, aren't you?" "Of course," she said. "Science should be mutual." The woman, or rather the Vithari, had a way of turning every line into a dare. She wasn't just observing humanity. She was testing the limits of how much embarrassment one scientist could endure before spontaneously combusting. When she finally allowed another scan, the machine displayed a holographic projection of her anatomy, perfectly mapped systems glowing in shades of teal and gold. I tried to focus on the data, not the person standing smugly beside me. "Fascinating. Dual cardiac structures, variable temperature regulation, and neural lattices along the clavicle. Incredible." She tilted her head. "Translation?" "You're built differently." Her expression softened. "I'm not built like human women," she murmured. And before my better judgment could intervene, I grinned. "You've got 2 things they'll never have: bioluminescent nerves and the ability to make lab equipment fall in love." That earned me a slow, knowing smile. "Careful, Doctor. You sound like you're flirting with a scientific specimen. I'm not, I said too quickly. You are. I'm hypothetically admiring the complexity of your biology. She stepped closer, the air between us charged with static and something uncomfortably warm. Hypothetically, she echoed, voice a shade lower. Such a fascinating word. So safe, so human. The console beeped, snapping the tension like a broken circuit. The data stream finished compiling. Excellent, I said, forcing a professional tone. We've got enough for analysis. She crossed her arms, amusement glittering in her eyes. You analyze. I'll explore. Explore what? Earth customs. You have a cafeteria, yes? I've heard rumors of pie, I sighed, defeated. Fine. But no pushing any buttons on the food dispensers. No promises, she said, already walking toward the door. Chaos breeds evolution, remember? As she disappeared down the corridor, every automated sensor she passed blinked to life, briefly glitching from her bioelectric field. I stared at the flickering lights and muttered to myself, and evolution apparently comes with attitude. But I followed her anyway. The next morning, the entire research deck was buzzing with rumors. Apparently, the alien lieutenant who made the scanner blush had become the most discussed topic in the break room. Not that Liara seemed remotely embarrassed. When I entered the cafeteria, she was already seated at a table surrounded by curious humans, calmly explaining to a biologist that Earth utensils were primitive tools designed to test patience. Forks, she said with absolute authority, holding one up. These resemble torture instruments used by the Arvath species. Yet you use them to eat dessert? They're efficient, I said, sliding into the seat opposite her. She twirled the fork experimentally. If efficiency were the goal, you'd simply inhale your nutrients. Like sensible civilizations. Some of us prefer to chew, I countered. Ah, yes, she said, eyes glinting. The ancient art of masticating. The physicist sitting nearby nearly choked on his coffee. Liara smiled innocently, and I could practically feel my reputation slipping into orbit. I leaned forward. Are you deliberately trying to cause chaos again? She rested her chin on her hand. I told you yesterday, chaos breeds evolution. On this ship, chaos breeds paperwork. Her grin widened. Then you're evolving through administrative suffering, I sighed. You're impossible. Admit it, she said. That's precisely what makes me fascinating. She wasn't wrong. After breakfast, we returned to the lab for more controlled studies. Controlled being an optimistic word for what followed. The objective for the day, measure comparative reflex responses between humans and Vithari. Simple, right? Until Liara decided to improvise. I held the reflex hammer. Just a light tap on the knee. Don't move, don't... She snatched the hammer mid-swing. And if I do this? She asked, tapping my knee instead. My leg jerked reflexively, slamming into the counter. She raised an elegant eyebrow. Fascinating. The human reflex arc functions perfectly. That's because you startled me. Good data often comes from surprise. I'll note that down under unethical enthusiasm. She laughed again, and for some reason that sound felt like a reward. Half the time, I couldn't tell if she was mocking me or genuinely curious. Maybe both. Later that afternoon, we moved to the neural interface chamber, a translucent sphere designed to map brainwaves during interspecies communication. We sat across from each other, connected by shimmering threads of light. Just think of something neutral, I instructed, like mathematics or the periodic table. Understood, she said. I'm thinking about your heartbeat. Not neutral. Too late. The monitor behind me spiked in rhythm. Liara tilted her head, clearly amused. Remarkable synchronization. Our neural frequencies align under stress. Who says I'm stressed? Your pulse, your breathing, your inability to maintain eye contact? I sighed. You're very observant. Observation is the first step toward understanding, she said. And understanding often leads to complications. There was that pause again. The unspoken space between science and something far less academic. Before I could reply, the door slid open and a voice called, Dr. Hale! The captain wants your report! Perfect timing. Liara disconnected the neural filaments with a graceful flick. Saved by authority, she teased. As I left the chamber, she called after me, "Don't forget to record the data spike labeled embarrassment-induced resonance." The captain, a stern woman with a face carved from discipline, stared me down across her desk. "Dr. Hale, the Vithari liaison reports unconventional research methods." I froze. "Unconventional?" "She claims you are studying emotional reciprocity through shared humor. Care to explain?" I coughed. "Cultural acclimation exercises, ma'am." She folded her hands. "Doctor, this is a diplomatic mission, not a dating experiment. I assure you, it's entirely professional." "Good. Because if you compromise this alliance over interspecies flirtation, I'll personally reassign you to asteroid catalog duty." "Yes, ma'am." Back in the lab, Liara was leaning against the counter, reading my notes upside down. "How did the captain enjoy our report?" she asked innocently. "She thinks I'm flirting with you." Her eyes sparkled. "Are you?" I grabbed a data pad. "We're focusing on the experiment." "Which one?" she said, stepping closer. "The one where we measure brain waves or the one where we pretend not to notice them?" I pretended to be absorbed in my data pad. "Both," she laughed softly. "Humans are adorable when cornered." Then she did something unexpected. She reached out, tracing a faint blue glow along her own forearm. On Vethar, this biolight reacts to emotional changes. "It's involuntary." I looked closer. "It's glowing brighter." "Yes," she said simply. I swallowed. "And that means—" "It means I enjoy our experiments, Dr. Hale." The air between us felt heavy again. Not dangerous, just charged, like the moment before a storm decides whether to rain or thunder. I found my voice. "Well, that's scientifically encouraging." "Indeed," she said, eyes gleaming. "Tomorrow we test the hypothesis of compatibility." I blinked. "Compatibility of what?" She turned toward the door. "Systems integration, of course." That sounds suspiciously vague. She paused in the doorway. "Vague keeps you guessing. Guessing keeps you curious. And curiosity?" She smiled over her shoulder. "Breeds evolution." Then she was gone again, leaving me with flickering lights, a mountain of notes, and the realization that interspecies relations were far more complicated and far more entertaining than any textbook could capture. I sat down, staring at the neural interface still humming faintly, and muttered, "If this is science, I might actually survive the paperwork." I should have known Liara's definition of compatibility test wouldn't match any in the Federation manual. When I entered the lab that morning, she'd transformed it into what looked like a cross between a physics experiment and a date gone rogue. There were hollow candles flickering on the counters, the ambient lights dimmed to a suspiciously mood level, and the scanner was streaming gentle classical music from somewhere in the ship's archives. "Good morning, Dr. Hale," she said sweetly. "Ready for data collection?" "Data on what? Ambient lighting psychology?" "Biochemical response to proximity." She gestured to two chairs positioned far too close together. "We sit, we measure. We see if science approves." I eyed the setup. "This feels less like research and more like entrapment." "Semantics," she said, settling gracefully into one chair. "Hypothesis: the more humans deny attraction, the stronger their physiological response." I sighed but sat down anyway. "Because curiosity has always been humanity's worst defense mechanism." She leaned forward, eyes bright. "Step 1, sustained eye contact." "That's not—" "Step 1, she repeated firmly. I held her gaze. It was like staring into a nebula, beautiful, dizzying, and probably dangerous to unshielded equipment. My heart rate monitor immediately betrayed me with a sharp spike on the console. Liara grinned. "Fascinating. The specimen reacts to visual stimuli." "The specimen also has ears," I said. Deadpan. "Good. They're turning red. Add that to the data. You're enjoying this far too much." She tilted her head thoughtfully. "Enjoyment increases participant engagement. See? I'm improving your methodology." Halfway through the test, Commander Devlin from engineering wandered in, holding a diagnostic tablet. He froze at the sight of us surrounded by candlelight and heart rate sensors. Wrong room," he said quickly. Liara beamed. "Perfect timing, Commander." Would you like to participate? Devlin blanched. Nope. I'm just here for the plasma conduit readouts. He fled so fast he nearly tripped over a stool. Liara chuckled. Humans are delightfully skittish. They just value plausible deniability, I said. Ah, she replied. So the rest of the ship will definitely think we're dating now. I buried my face in my hands. Wonderful. But the truth was, something about her laughter made the embarrassment worthwhile. She had a way of turning chaos into connection, of making every awkward moment feel oddly meaningful. The afternoon brought our next experiment, cooperative navigation in the simulation deck. The goal was to test joint reflex synchronization. The result was an interstellar disaster. Left thruster! I shouted as we dove toward a virtual asteroid field. Which left? She demanded. The only left! Relative to what? Space. We crashed into the simulation wall so spectacularly that the holographic asteroid actually applauded us on replay. When the lights flickered back to normal, Liara looked at the smoking console and said, perfectly serious, I think our coordination is improving. I gave her a flat look. That's your definition of improvement? We died together this time, she said. Progress. Later, while the technicians repaired the simulator, we sat in the observation lounge watching the planet spin lazily below. For once, she looked quiet, pensive, almost vulnerable. Do you ever regret leaving Vethar? I asked. She considered. Sometimes. But curiosity pulls harder than gravity. Then she smiled sideways. Besides, your people are entertaining. Entertaining, I echoed. That's one word for us. You fight entropy with optimism, she said softly. You joke in the face of the void. Even when you're afraid, you make it sound funny. That's how we cope. Yes, she murmured. And maybe that's why I like being here. Her glow brightened slightly, faint blue along her collarbones. It wasn't flirtation this time, just warmth. Real warmth. I felt something unclench in my chest that I hadn't realized was there. Of course, that was exactly when the ship's AI announced over the intercom. Attention, crew of Deck 5, please refrain from conducting romantic experiments in restricted laboratories. The entire lounge turned to stare at us. Liara blinked. I see the ship is gossiping now. I told you the scanners record everything. I groaned. Well, she said, eyes dancing, at least our results are reproducible. From that day onward, the crew treated us like an ongoing sitcom. Every time we entered a room together, someone whistled. Someone else hummed wedding music. Liara loved it. I pretended to hate it, but secretly, I didn't mind. That evening, she found me in the lab finishing reports. You look tired, she said. I've been writing explanations for why the neural interface now registers as a social hazard. Ah, bureaucracy, the most advanced form of torture. She leaned against the counter. You could always request reassignment, I looked at her. And miss the daily chaos you bring? Not a chance. She smiled slowly. Then maybe you're evolving after all. I closed my datapad. Or just adapting to exposure. Same thing, she said. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of the ship filled the silence, the steady rhythm of life between stars. Then Liara reached out and touched the back of my hand, just briefly. The contact was light, almost accidental. But her biolight flared again. Good night. Dr. Hale, she said, turning to leave. Good night. Lieutenant Chaos, I replied. As the doors slid shut behind her, I realized I was smiling like an idiot. When disaster finally struck, it was, of course, Liara's fault. Well, partly. She only pressed one button. Unfortunately, it was the button that opened a communication line to every ship in orbital range. The morning had started innocently enough. I was running diagnostics on the neural interface, and Liara was helping, which meant leaning over my shoulder and asking questions specifically designed to make me lose concentration. So, she said, if our frequencies synchronize again, would that technically qualify as resonance? Yes. Emotional or electrical? Both. If you stop breathing down my— Wait, what are you— Don't press— She pressed. The comm screen blinked to life, and suddenly, half the Federation fleet was hearing my startled voice say, Yes, we're in perfect resonance right now. There was a long pause on the open channel. Then Captain Rourke's voice came through, deadpan, "Dr. Hale, is this an appropriate time to announce your engagement to the alien ambassador?" Liara looked delighted. "Engagement!" That escalated quickly. I groaned into my hands. "This is a career-death spiral," Rourke sighed. "Hale, I don't want to know. Just turn off the transmitter before the diplomatic corps makes it official." Liara leaned closer to the mic. "Too late, Captain. We're collecting multi-species data now. End transmission," I yelped, slamming the console. The channel cut with an indignant beep. She smirked. "Your reaction time is improving. I'm going to be legendary on this ship. Isn't that what every scientist wants? Immortality through gossip? Not this kind." That afternoon, a real emergency overshadowed our accidental engagement announcement. A radiation surge from the planet below scrambled half the ship's sensors. For once, chaos wasn't Liara's doing. We raced to the control deck, alarms flashing red. The data streams were unreadable. The ship's AI announced in its usual calm tone, "Warning, atmospheric interference approaching critical." "Manual recalibration needed," I said, already typing. "If the feedback loop collapses, we lose orbit." Liara stepped beside me. "What do you need?" I hesitated. "Your neural lattice emits stabilizing frequencies. If you link to the system carefully, it might dampen the surge." She nodded. "Carefully is relative, Doctor. You'll be exposed to high energy levels." She gave me that maddening half-smile. "So, a normal day." We connected her bio-interface to the ship's system. Immediately, lines of light ran up her arms, pulsing in rhythm with the console. I monitored her vitals. The readings jumped erratically. "Liara, your neural output's spiking." "I can handle it," she said through clenched teeth. "Redirect the plasma flow." "Doing it. Hang on." The lights flickered, the engines roared, and for one terrible second, everything went white. Then, silence. The ship stabilized. Orbit restored. "Systems green," I turned to her. "You did it!" She swayed on her feet, smiling faintly. "Told you. Compatibility." I caught her before she fell, lowering her to the floor. "You absolute maniac," I whispered. "You could have fried your circuits." Her eyes fluttered open. "But didn't. Evolution through chaos, remember?" "Next time," I said, voice shaking, "we're evolving through safety manuals." She laughed weakly. "Boring." The medbay declared her stable within the hour. By the time she was upright again, the captain had arrived to personally deliver a lecture and a commendation. "Lieutenant Liara, Dr. Hale," Rourke said, hands clasped behind her back. "Your unconventional cooperation saved the ship. Also, half the crew now believes you're married." Liara beamed. "Statistical misunderstanding," Rourke glared at me. "Doctor, please ensure future research remains strictly professional." "Yes." "Ma'am," I said automatically. Liara whispered. "Define strictly." The captain left before I could respond. Later that night, we sat in the observation lounge again. Outside the viewport, the planet's storm systems glowed in soft green arcs, like the reflection of her own light. "You nearly overloaded yourself today," I said. She shrugged. "Calculated risk." That calculation looked suspiciously reckless. Maybe I was testing human concern. "You didn't need to risk your life to know I care." Her expression softened. "You're very honest when you're tired. Occupational hazard." We sat in silence for a while, watching the world spin. Then she said quietly, "When I return to Vethar, they'll ask for a report on humanity." I smiled. "And what will you tell them?" "That humans are chaotic," she said thoughtfully. "Imperfect. Endlessly curious. And that one of them taught me how to laugh at the void." That's a surprisingly nice summary. I might also mention that their scientists make terrible poker faces. "I'll accept that." She turned toward me, glowing faintly. "You know, Riven, on my world, when two beings achieve resonance under stress, it's considered significant." I raised an eyebrow. "Significant how?" She stood, extending a hand. "Come with me someday and find out." I hesitated, then took it. "You realize this means more paperwork." "Chaos breeds evolution," she reminded me, smiling. Weeks later, the official mission report reached the Federation archives. It read, "Successful cultural exchange. Minor collateral gossip. Recommend future collaboration with Vithari Concord, preferably supervised." Unofficially, the crew simply called it the experiment. And somewhere between the data logs and the laughter, between the accidents and the orbit repairs, I'd stopped thinking of Liara as a subject of study and started thinking of her as my favorite anomaly. If anyone ever asks how love survives in the vacuum of space, I'll tell them this: it doesn't need oxygen. Just curiosity, laughter, and a partner reckless enough to press the wrong button. Because sometimes, the best discoveries aren't made under microscopes. They're made between heartbeats and maybe, just maybe, between species.